the essence of strategy when we're doing category analysis and sourcing strategy. How do we boil this down? Well, let's take a look at aligning what we're doing in category analysis to our company strategy. So every company has a strategy. It might be very well defined or it might not be well defined, but every company has a strategy. And usually strategies are focused on the customer, their strategic positioning, and the value proposition. So when you're thinking about the customer, who are your customers? Who are the company's customers? Are you looking at other businesses? Are you looking at customers that maybe make $100,000 or more? Or are you looking at customers that are $50,000 and less in income? Who are your customers? Because that's going to make a huge impact to your strategy. Because if your customers are multi-millionaires, you're going to do things differently than customers that maybe have a household income of $50,000 or less. So think about that. Strategic positioning. What's your company mission? What's your company's mission? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to make the world a safer place and you're a security company? Or are you a nonprofit that's advocating for disabled individuals? Or are you a travel agency and you want people to go out and see the world? With your help, of course, But how is your company going to accomplish that mission? If you're a travel agency and you want people to travel, how are you going to help them do that? Because you want people to have, let's say, a wonderful experience and eye-opening experiences. Well, you got to figure out what that mission is and then target your customers, and then you have this value proposition. What value must you provide to meet your customers' needs? I started on the travel agency. Well, what value do you need to provide your customers? Well, the customers, when they're traveling, especially if they're spending a lot of money and going to certain places, they expect a higher level of service. So it's not like you're going to put them in a Days Inn. You might start looking at Sheraton. You might start looking at Hilton hotels. You might start looking at the higher end hotels for your customers, or the equivalent in other countries to that level of hotel. But you may offer something to see, let's say, the Great Wall of China, or Stonehenge, or the pyramids of Giza. You might look at some of these wonders of the world. Well, if that's your goal, to provide this amazing experience, that value of that amazing experience, why would your company even bother with, oh yeah, let's go to a town in the middle of nowhere where the largest ball of string is? That's not your company's mission, your goal of your company. And trying to put value on that's going to be a very small market of customers, right? So strategy on how to accomplish these three things: to identify your customers, your strategic positioning, and that value you can bring your customers. Once that is established, now you move on to the purchasing side of it. So as there's the role of purchasing and the role of the category. So role of purchasing. How does your purchasing support your company strategy? So if you're a travel agency, since I started down that path, are you going to purchase hotel rooms at the lower end hotels? Days Inn, Wyndham, Super 8, the budget hotels. Nothing wrong with those hotels. I've stayed in them myself. But sometimes you just want something better, and you are willing to pay more for that value. Well, in purchasing, are we going to source a contract with those hotels if we're trying to provide the value to the customer of a higher level trip, a vacation? I would hope not, but you might have some customers that prefer that. And if they do, okay, you can work on it. But you might try to get a contract with Hilton International, I believe is what they're called, but the owners of the Hilton brand. And if you can do that, you might be able to get some great deals, and that means you can make more money as a company because you're getting a discount. You can take a discount off of the advertised price for your customers and sell them that, but you're still making money. So purchasing can support the company's strategy. Now, the role of the category. So when you're sourcing, the different categories are going to have different priorities. So when you're thinking of the category, let's say you have accommodations. You might lump accommodations as the hotel room. Well, what about transportation to those accommodations, food, and everything else? You know, the ticket cost for these attractions, maybe a tour guide, and all these other things. If you break those down into categories, you might be able to say, okay, well, if we combine the transportation from the airport and the hotel, we might be able to get a better deal because we're using one company for that. Or we're going to have a contract with the hotel, and the hotel, as part of the contract, is going to give us vouchers for meals at the hotel. That could be a great thing. But if you don't do that, that means you'll be spending more money because you can't use these, I'll just say, economies of scale. You can't combine things together to get a better price. So think about it. How does the category contribute to your customer satisfaction? Some customers, let's say on vacation, they want to go out and eat at the expensive restaurants, and they want to have the experience of maybe eating at restaurants they normally don't go to where they're from. Or maybe where they're from doesn't have those kind of restaurants. Well, maybe you can talk to some of the restaurants and get a good deal where if they go in and say, hey, I'm with ABC Tourism, there might be some discounts you can talk with that restaurant because you'll be kind of pushing your customers or recommending those places to your customers. So that's the role of the category. You try to lump things into a similar category to talk for your purchasing team to go out and source for that category. Now, you'll usually have a category analyst who will focus on one category, and you'll have that for each category. You might have someone that covers two. But these people will become experts in these categories. But what are some sourcing strategies, right? Now, these are category specific. So when we're thinking about these different categories, regardless of what the category is or what you're sourcing, or why you're sourcing it, or your company that you're sourcing it for, you can look at these basic 6 categories and there's some more, but these are the basic ones here. Insourcing versus outsourcing. Can you do it in-house, or do you need to outsource it to another company? If you remember, there's this make versus buy decision. You can either make it in-house or outsource it and buy it. So it's kind of similar, but you're trying to make the decision. Do you do it yourself or do you send it out? Supply base optimization. Your suppliers. Do you have 200 suppliers for one category? Well, do you really need 200 suppliers, or can you maybe chop that down to 10? So you optimize it. Now you don't have to talk to 200 people, you only need to talk to 10. It's going to save you a lot of time and effort and money. Supply risk management. How are you going to manage risk? Well, when you're in categories, you generally are very well versed in those categories, so you might be able to talk to one supplier and say, hey, supplier A can't supply me. Supplier B, can you do it? Because you understand the market. So supplier involvement in innovation and design. So when you're working with a supplier closely, your supplier might actually make recommendations on how to change your product or innovate your product. Don't just dismiss these ideas. These are good ideas. If they're making your product and they think of a way that might make it better, listen to them and get that information to the right people. Now, of course, you're the purchasing person, so they should go through you with these ideas. Don't give them research and development's phone number, because of course research and development is going to be all over it, but is it going to cost more? Well, do you need to renegotiate the contract and all these other aspects? You need to stay as that middleman. Supplier development. Work with your suppliers. If they're not up to the level you want them to be, maybe your company has the experience and skill to bring them up to that level by coaching and mentoring them and assisting them when necessary. And then, of course, we need to factor in the total cost of ownership. There's a huge difference between buying a projector for a classroom or buying a car that's going to be used as a runabout vehicle around town. The cost of ownership is going to be greatly different. So this might be a category on itself. If the total cost of ownership is above a certain threshold, it might be a different category than items that are not above that. So what kind of questions should you ask for these strategies? You want to consider these. And like I said, these are not the only ones to consider. You can consider hundreds of them if you want to and you have the time. But these are some basic ones you should start to consider. So think to yourself, what other questions would you ask? They might be in these categories or in other categories. So let's talk about a tool on how to conduct a category analysis, because this is going to be extremely useful to make your job easier. So let's go ahead and move on to the next video for conducting a category analysis.